Thakore, editor of EducationWorld.
Good morning, I'm Summiya Yasmeen, managing editor.
So, in the latest October issue of EducationWorld, we featured our very first biographical story, cover story, and that is on a very extraordinary Professor C. Raj Kumar, founding Vice Chancellor of the O.P. Jindal Global University.
Before we talk to you and tell you more about our cover story, let's tell you what we've got in our other sections, all again very interesting features. In our editorial section, we've got two very interesting and stimulating edits. One is on why the government needs to stop harassment of private schools.
Not the central and state governments need to stop the harassment of private schools. We made a direct appeal to the government that they should raise the standard of government school rather than pull private schools down.
Yes, and our second edit is on why the trust deficit may kill the national asset monetization pipeline project. Both very stimulating edits, so we recommend you read them. And in our education news section, again, we've got a brief news coverage from the major states. There's a very interesting development and very high potential development of the formation of the Boarding Schools Association of India, which is going to represent India's top-ranked legacy boarding schools, in fact, become a voice for India's boarding schools.
Yes.
From the national capital, Delhi state, we have again announcement by the AAP government to introduce a patriotism curriculum. So you can read about that to know the plus and the minuses of this curriculum. And of course,
there are stories from
Maharashtra, Karnataka, West Bengal. West Bengal, we've highlighted the controversy at the Vishwa Bharati University, which is now snowballing into a major controversy. Yes. And a very, very insightful expert comment column by Shiv Vishwanathan, where he talks about why we need to ideate an alternative imagination. He compares China and India. And in fact, he advocates a contrarian viewpoint, saying that yes, China has top universities in
the rankings,
and India doesn't. So there's always a comparison and criticism of India. But he says perhaps that's not bad, because in India there is still
a lot of freedom in the universities compared to China, and that Indian universities need to make their education experience a joyous one,
yes,
unlike China.
Yes. Institutional profile, two profiles of institutions. One is the Indus Valley World School in Kolkata, and the second one is on University of Dundee, Scotland. Very informative, very useful
Ancient links with India.
Yes, very useful information for parents and secondary students on both these institutions. And young achievers, as usual, two young talented young achievers profile. Mana Patel, who represented India in swimming at the Olympics, Tokyo Olympics.
In the backstroke event.
Yes.
She didn't win, but she gave a good account of this.
Yes.
And the other one is on...
and the other young is a social activist entrepreneur, Satya Mehta. Based in Noida, who was conferred the prestigious Diana Award for social service.
Princess Diana.
Yes. And now we come to our cover story, Dilip. Perhaps you'd like to tell our readers.
Yes. Well, within 12 years since it admitted its first batch of 112 students, the Sonipat, Haryana-based O.P. Jindal University, established 2009, is ranked India's #1 private university and among the global top 750 by Thakore Simmons. That's the London-based rating agency which ranks over 2,000 universities around the world. Credit for this unprecedented evolution of this higher education institution mainly due to its tireless and indefatigable founding Vice Chancellor, Dr. C. Raj Kumar. It's a remarkable story of a boy born into a modest middle-class family of government servants who in the 1970s, were very poorly remunerated, born in Nagarcoil, way down in Tamil Nadu, and then how he moved in up, finished his schooling in Tamil Nadu, went to
Delhi University, from there to Oxford,
Loyola
from there
first,
to
Loyola College first, then Delhi University, where he won a
Rhodes Scholarship to Oxford.
Rhodes Scholarship to Oxford, and from there he won another scholarship to Harvard, and then he qualified as a lawyer, practiced law for briefly in New York, and then went into academia.
Taught in Japan,
Hong Kong, and
why
then
he returned to India to set
yes,
up
and
this.
all along he is a great nationalist, and all along he had his ambition was to study these universities carefully and set up a world-class university in India on a par or modelled on these great universities
Yes.
In the West, with a mixture of East, Japan, Hong Kong. The outcome of his, then remarkably, he persuaded Naveen Jindal of the Jindal steel, the steel tycoon, yes, to invest a record-breaking 500 crores to set up the O.P. Jindal Global University in memory of his father, who was a philanthropist and an educationist and also a politician.
Yes.
And the outcome of all this is the O.P. Jindal
Yes,
Global
we recommend
University.
this story, that you read this story. It's an inspirational story of how Dr. Rajkumar has transformed this relatively new university into India's #1 university according to QS. It's a remarkable growth trajectory.
People who read this will feel inspired to replicate Dr. Rajkumar's experience and set up great private universities on Ivy League model in India.
Yes. Our next section, people. Again, three remarkable people profiled. One is a tribal champion in West Bengal.
Children's champion.
Yes, tribal children's champion in West Bengal, who has started a very unique school for the Birru tribe, very much neglected tribe in Purulia district of West Bengal. And the other gentleman we've profiled is Mr. Shekhar Mehta, who is the Rotary International President.
Yes. And also Anish Bhatia was the founder of Open Door, an initiative which leverages the power of inquiry to transform young learners into curious and better thinkers.
Yes.
Then we have our international news section, very interesting stories from the United States, the rankings, the new THE, that's Times Higher Education rankings, unique research university in Japan.
And then in Afghanistan, the turmoil and how it has disrupted women's education especially.
Yes. And also there's a very interesting story on micro degrees, which are very popular, short-term vocational kind of degrees, which two eminent economists criticize and say that's not a good development.
Yes.
Worth reading.
Yes. And in our special report, we talk about the IT capitals, a shocking digital education divide.
That's Bengaluru.
Yes, Bangalore, also known as Bengaluru. We all know India's Silicon Valley IT hub, but the last year of the pandemic has laid bare, the underbelly of this shocking digital education divide in India's IT capital.
One would expect that in
yes,
India,
it will be highly connected to the digital world. Unfortunately,
all kinds of schools would be fairly digitalized, but actually that's not the case. And there's a huge political divide which is generating a lot of social tensions also in the city. And we end that story with a plea to the captains of India's IT industry to get involved with the community and not to retreat behind gated walls and widen the divide between the government schools and children from underprivileged sections of society. I think the city is rich enough to help everybody in the city.
30 to 40% of all software exports revenue of India are generated from Bangalore's IT companies.
Indeed, yes. Very interesting interview with Dr. S. Sadagopan, who was the founding director of the Indian Institute of Information Technology, Bangalore, triple ITB, who recently retired after a long innings of 22 years, in which he established this institution into a remarkable computer science institutions for the computer industry. And the graduates are snapped up by industry, IT companies, and has done a remarkable job. And Dr. Sadagopan believes that, contrary to the popular belief that Indian software professionals are mainly doing low-end jobs for multinationals, he disputes that in this interview, and he said they're working right across the spectrum from very sophisticated to low end. In our book section, very interesting book written by Dr. Kishore Mehbubani, who is a Professor Emeritus at the National University of Singapore and a China scholar and an expert on Southeast Asia. And the title of the book is quite provocative, Has China Won? According to him, in the year, China has shown remarkable progress in education, industry, and higher education in particular, and IT and cyber warfare.
And our second book review is on Frontier Boundary.
Yeah, that's also very interesting. It's about Khan
Abdul Ghaffar Khan, and why he still remains a very revered figure in Afghanistan and among the Pashtuns, for his path-breaking and pioneer ideas of non-violence.
A very underreported person who was a close friend of colleague of Gandhiji. And of course, then we have our postscript page where we talk about communism, our comrades. Yes, our comrades are still not alive, still criticizing the captains of industry, and still in love with the public sector, which is losing money heavily hand over fist. Then there's about but at the same time, our businessmen and top leaders in industry also need to become more involved with the population and not waste their wealth in Epicureanism, as we say. And then in the third postscript, we talk about why does India have such poor housing stock? Why has the housing industry been neglected for so many years? And then who's responsible? That's one of the questions we raise.
Yes, so all in all, a great October issue. We recommend that you read it and create also a debate. We'd love to hear what you think about our stories. Write to us. Before we leave our audience, let's quickly tell them in ParentsWorld, this issue we've done I think a very relevant story on how parents can develop the life skills of children in the pandemic era. Unfortunately, over 18 months of school closure, social mobility restrictions, lockdowns have restricted the social skills development of children and their life skills, which are very important.
Let alone restricted, some of them lost all those skills.
Lost skills such as communication, good manners, etiquette. All these are very important life-changing skills. We speak to a range of experts who say that how can parents help children rebuild these skills?
It's very important, life and soft skills.
Yes.
And there's other stories in ParentsWorld also. A mutating household pet, that's a mystery. And paintballing, which is becoming a very, very popular game.
Yes, and also how you can encourage your children to get creative with haiku, a form of Japanese poetry, which is becoming very popular. Indeed. Very interesting.
Ancient art of Japanese poetry, haiku.
So
that's all from us.
That's all from us. Thank you.
Bye.